Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Powerful on Purpose, where we talk to amazing women who are using their story to build businesses and create impact beyond their own lives. And today's guest is no exception, Kathleen Lawson. Super excited to have Kathleen. And Kathleen is a business strategist who helps female solopreneurs step into their CEO role. So bringing structure, focus, and intentional action to businesses built on purpose. And maybe that sounds a little overwhelming, but once you meet Kathleen, you'll understand she can simplify this process for you. So welcome, Kathleen. Super excited to have you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. All right. Well, I always like to start with what led you to do what you're doing now, and what is it that you're doing for female entrepreneurs?
Okay. So my origin story, right? I feel like a superhero,
That's right. Put on your cape.
Yeah, put on my cape. So I work with female solopreneurs, as you said, and women coming out of the corporate world trying to figure out how to turn their expertise into a business. And so I work with them to put the strategy, structure, routines in place. And as I continue to work with them through the life of their business, really step more firmly into their role as CEO. And so my story goes back like all the way. I came out of the corporate world. I actually left the corporate world 25 years ago. And at that time, so I had two young stepchildren, and then found myself pregnant with twins right after I got married. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do in the whole childcare thing, and was just not getting any sort of flexibility with the company that I worked for. And my twins came early, and I couldn't have them out in public, couldn't have anybody over. And it just sort of like, at that point, I had no choice. I left my work. And so for a number of years, well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to do something on my own, but this was when everybody was on virtual leave, it was pre-social media. And I was like, how do I do this? I had two young boys and then a set of twins, also boys. And I was like, I can't go into the city and go networking. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. And so I did some other things while they were young. And eventually I did a little bit of freelance consulting, very kind of as things landed in my lap, some business plans, some marketing plans, things like that. But once those my set of twins there, once they were going off to college, and I had a little more space and time to think about, all right, what do I, now I'm going to have more time. And I had one more after that. So I had five altogether, but I had the space to really think about, what do I want to do now? The world had changed at that point, and there was social media and people were doing things virtually. And I recognized that I really wanted to do what I wish I had access to all those years earlier. Like I wanted somebody to show me how I could build a business that fit my life, which at that point, I didn't know anybody, and I didn't know how to do that. So I was really looking for what I had wanted years earlier. And so that's what I started doing. So that was about 8 years ago. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And, and I was able to really bring all of my professional experience here. I started out in marketing. I'd worked in advertising. I'd worked in operations. I had done a lot of different things around the business world. So I was able to bring all of that experience into what I do now.
Right. And I love that. That's such a universal theme for so many of us, right? I got into the book world because the things I saw made me crazy. I was like, this cannot be, right? So I love that origin story, if you will. While you were talking, it occurred to me, what is the shift a woman needs to make from maybe even being a CEO at a corporation to now being a CEO of her own?
Well, it's like you're now in charge of everything, and you have to find a way to either do it or manage it or outsource it. But you've got to take on all of those hats, and that's always the frustrating thing, especially for, when we're kind of getting into that. And it's kind of shocking and stunning for some women. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for the bookkeeping, and I'm responsible for selling all the time, and I'm responsible for, because they come into this space with a skill or gift, and that's the thing they're good at, and that's the thing they want to do. And then it's like all the other things they have to do. And it's one of the things that I see, especially with the women that coming out of the corporate space, and they may be, as you were saying, they could have been the CEO, or they're heading up like big departments and big budgets and big things, and they're so good at what they do and they're so successful in that space, and then they come over, to try and start a business, and all the things they don't know. And I know it's so frustrating, and it's like, but do you remember, like, you saw me over there, I was so smart and I was so good at this, like, why is this so hard, why am I having so much trouble? And you've got to be open to help, and you've got to be open to the structure and all the things that are going to help you run this business. And I think that's one of the other things too. Like, I always see people right off the bat, they're like, well, I work for myself now, I can do whatever I want whenever I want, and they throw all their structure out the window. And then finally they recognize that, oh, maybe that's not a bad thing. And that's usually when I get them, because they're like, okay, maybe the structure is a good thing. And they start to recognize that they've got to put the structure back in place if they want a sustainable business, because you can't wing it forever and be, and grow and have a sustainable business.
Right. Well, and I think you make a really valid point too about structure, right? I think sometimes people hear that and they hear rigidity, right?
Yeah.
Out of structure really.
Yeah. It sets you free. It gives you the time and space to do all the other things. And I find that, like, a lot of the really creative people, that's a tough lesson for them. And then they find, like, oh, I have more time and space to do my creative things when I'm not spending all my time reinventing the wheel every single day and trying to do everything manually and and constantly rethinking the same thing over and over and over. Like, we put some structure to that, and it's like, oh, this is a lot easier. I can now manage that, and now look at all this time and space I have to do the thing I want to do.
Absolutely, right. And free up that brain power, right? I think that's a lot of it for me too, is if I don't have a system, I spend a lot of brain power, like chasing the rabbit trails and all sorts of stuff. If I have a system, like, my brain can check out during system time, right? And then like when it needs to be online.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge part of it. The mental load and the decision fatigue. I mean, like, making the decisions over and over and over, it's exhausting. And all the things you hold in your head. I mean, once you put, like, the systems and that structure in place, like you said, let it go. I kind of have to think about it. Like, I know that this is going to happen here. Like, I don't need to sit and worry about it. If you have a routine around your business development, then you don't get up every day and go, oh my gosh, my business, what am I going to do? Like, well, I'm going to this networking thing, and then I've got this block to follow up with people, and I have, like, these things all set up, and I don't have to think about it.
Right. And I imagine that's somewhat of a common misconception when women come to you, when you start talking about that, they're like, oh, no, that's, until, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. You've got to put those things in place. Otherwise, like you said, it's rethinking the decisions. It's the heavy mental load. It's like, I just thinking about it, I'm like,
yeah, exactly. So what is your advice for someone wanting to transition, and kind of what would be the first step that they should think about or take, whether they're doing that or not, right? As you see people moving, what's one step that makes it easier to come online?
So coming into a business or starting to up level? It's like just coming into a business?
Yeah, coming into a business, right? Building a business, leaving that other structure and now having to create your own.
I think it's about having a plan. It's about sequencing and not trying to do everything at once. I think that's where, and I think that's also the case for people trying to up level. You had sent me a note about that. And I think that's where people run into a lot of trouble too, is like they try and do everything at once. And you can't, like, you cannot carry forward all the goals at the same time. And you've got to kind of think about, one thing at a time. So if you are just starting, it's really about, well, what am I doing? Like, just sort of setting up, like, what's the offer, getting like that piece, and then very, very simple sort of structure behind it. I find when people know how they're going to handle a client, they show up much more confidently in the sales process. So, kind of working through, like, how do we bring them in? How am I going to actually deliver this service? Okay, now I've got that figured out. Because, when you're in a sales call and you don't quite know what you're going to do with that, like, what if they say yes? Oh my God. Like, you don't show up as confidently. But if like, okay, if they say yes, then we're going to do this. I'm going to set up this meeting. We're going to do that. This is the steps. Then you're ready to sell and you show up really confidently. And what we want to do is go out. I mean, I work primarily with service-based business owners. So it's, a lot about networking. We kind of just define what the offer is, like the basic structure. And then we get them talking to people because they need those first couple clients to sort of test the whole thing. I think a lot of people, when they come in, it's like, well, I'm going to create a website and and I'm going to brand and I'm going to do, they want to work on that, like, which feels fun and creative. I'm always like, let's wait on that. And you don't need that in the beginning. I mean, I was in business for 2 years before I even put my first website together. But you need to work with a few people, because I find that most business owners change something about all of it as they work with their first couple of clients. They change like who they want to target, or the results come out differently, or something's different. And if you invest a lot in a website up front before you've worked with anybody, you're just going to end up kind of redoing that in a couple months. So I find, like, let's work with a few people. Let's kind of, test the process. Let's think about, who you're best for and what the outcomes are going to be. And then, then you're kind of, you get going, and then you can start to work on more of the marketing stuff, set up the website and do all that afterwards. But yeah, you want to just kind of define that and then find those first few clients.
And I love that. And I love that sales reframe, because you're 100% right? If we're unsure, it makes it very difficult to sell or to even talk about it, right? Because then and people can read body language, whether they're actively doing it or not. We all understand when someone, we get the weird vibes or whatever and don't know what's going on. So yeah, that's a super valid point. Well, then speak to this evolving too. What is, as people, because you said, you kind of take them through a trajectory, like you can work with them until they're on the Oscars, right? I don't know. Superstars. But what do you see as being some of those points where people kind of are hanging on the edge? Like, do I up level? Do I hang out here? How does that look and play out?
Well, I feel like for so many of us, business evolves, and it can evolve in different ways. It could evolve based on the clients you work with, or the industries, or it could be the services you offer. A lot of people want to, especially in the coach and consultant space, people want to do group programs, but you have to do the solo one-to-one work before you can do a group. You've got to work with enough people one-to-one and kind of see the different things that happen within like what you do before you can then manage an entire group. So that's like one thing that happens a lot. But, it's interesting. I run these quarterly planning sessions, and one of the ones that I just had coming into the second quarter, one of the groups, there was a lot of discussion about, because a bunch of people in that group at that time, we were talking about being in a foundational period versus a growth period based on up leveling. So like you decide like, oh, I'm like making this major change. And I think, again, back to the first point, people try and do too much at once. So it's like, oh, I'm going to up level. So I got to change up my offer and my marketing and, all these things at once. And you can't do all of that at the same time. So again, we come back to like the sequencing thing. So it's kind of like, all right, I'm in sort of a foundational period right now. I'm sort of shifting my offers and I'm figuring that out. And I've got some systems things that support that. And then it's like, okay, now that's all ready. Here's like what I can sell. So now I move more into like a business development period. And now I can focus on the marketing and talking to people and doing that. But sort of, I think, recognizing where you are and focusing in on that, getting that done, and then moving on to the next thing. I think you grow faster, but the momentum builds easier because you're not trying to do a million things at once. So like you're focused and you can move those things forward.
Right. And I think what entrepreneur doesn't have that struggle, right? Because I think we're creative thinkers. So we got 15 jillion ideas, really. And so that we all need you in our lives to say, wait a minute, let's bring this back down and finish this one thing and then add on the next thing that makes sense, right?
Right. Yeah. And you're right. Like we're idea people. We want to do all the things, and execution is like not nearly as fun as coming up with the ideas. But I still remember like when I was first starting out, one of my early services, I had these accountability groups, and I will never forget like the first one, this woman came, I was doing these little sort of mini sessions to get them set for the accountability group. And this woman came in, it was a 90-day, 12 weeks. And she had 8 goals. And I was like, I don't think we can do 8 goals. And it was a huge like aha moment for me. And I realized I had to kind of back the process up. Like I needed to work with them on like setting their goals too, because she came in thinking she like was going to accomplish these big, and these weren't like something she was going to do in one day. Like these were like big things and she had 8 of them for 90 days. And I was like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. So, but yeah, I think that's because it's counterintuitive. Like we feel like, oh, we've got to do all these things, but really the more you focus, the faster you move.
Exactly. And truthfully, I still have that on some days. I'm like, ooh. And I think the other thing is we underestimate the amount of time, right? Like I'm going to knock off these 4 pretty major things today. No big deal. Yeah. And you get halfway through one and you're like, oh, I guess that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's true. And, it's funny because I'm a big proponent of weekly planning, and I like looking at the week and sort of figuring out, what we're going to do for the week. But then you've got to look day to day, like you said there. But one of the things I like to do is kind of before we get really into, what we're going to do when, is I like to look at the entire week, because, you'll look at your week, and if you have a heavy meeting week and then you're dragging this to-do list that's as long as your arm into that week, it's never going to happen. But I think as women, like we're really guilty of this. Like we like, okay, here's my huge list. And it doesn't matter if it's realistic or not. And then you just end up at the end of the week discouraged and like a little frustrated with yourself. So like looking at that and saying, okay, this is a really busy week. This is all not getting done. So what really is important? Like, what do I really, really, really need to get done? And, it's interesting because the women that I've been working with for a long time have gotten so good at that. I have a daily accountability partner too, who's been like listening to me for years now. And every morning she's like, okay, well, I have a really busy meeting day. So like not much is going to get done. So I'm going to just say this, like this one thing is, if I get this one thing done, then that's great. Then you get to like win the day. And I find that's motivating and that feels good. And because you've been intentional about it, you're doing the really important thing. So rather than just showing up and doing the easy thing, it's like, you know what, like I have this thing that I really would like to make sure it gets done. And so I'm focused on that. And that's all I'm going to worry about. And I'm not going to drag this huge to-do list into the middle of it, which I know is not going to happen anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think there you speak to something also, because I find sometimes those little minute tasks, like they really hang on my mind, right? Like they create an open loop. And so if I can take 15 minutes and wipe out 2 or 3 of them, like, sending an email or something simple, then it like frees up my brain again and closes a loop. Like you're talking about dragging all this stuff with us instead of taking that time saying, okay, like I just got to get off my plate. So quit thinking about it.
Littles. There's nothing more frustrating than having something like that maybe like for weeks you're thinking about, and then you go to do it and it takes you 10 minutes. You're like, I have spent more time thinking about this thing than it actually took to do it. And that's like, I want to kick myself. But we all have those things, and you know exactly what I'm talking about because we all do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I love that, like blocking some time for the littles, like, and that's a thing too. It's like I have all these little things that I got to cross off. Yeah.
Well, and I end up with like notes everywhere, and finally I'll just take one day. I'm like, okay, like because I've moved sometimes, right? I've rewritten the same thing multiple times when it could have been a 5-minute fix. I would never had to write it again.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to give you a tip. That's part of our CEO hour on Friday. I call it the sticky note time, because so many people write their things on sticky notes. Now, I don't do sticky notes, but I do the margins of my planner. Like I have stuff written everywhere, but we take some time to look at all of those from the week. And if it's something quick, like, oh, I need to order this book, or I want to set up a meeting with somebody, you do it, or it just you've got to put it on your list. Maybe it's content ideas and you put it in your content list, or maybe it's to-dos and you put it there. But then you can kind of like get rid of the sticky notes from the week. You can close the page on your planner and you move on. So we call that sticky note time.
Nice. I love it. I do that. Yes. Because I pile. So I'm going to keep that in mind. Sticky note time.
Yeah.
And set aside a little time at the end of the week and clean up the mess.
Clear it up. Because the other thing too is like, we were so nervous about losing ideas. It's like, you've got all these, I had this idea. Oh, I had this great idea. Where was it? It's on a sticky note somewhere on my desk. And so we don't want to lose those, or content ideas, or whatever it might be, all those little notes. So
well, I do have a trick for that one for everyone out there listening. Google Docs is amazing for that. I actually will start a Google Doc with notes, with content ideas, right? And every time I get one, I just LinkedIn newsletters, I got a whole file of that. Now, some of them I probably won't ever use, but like you say, in the moment you think it's brilliant, I'm like, just save it. So it's,
Right.
again, not on my mind.
Right. Right. And then when you're sitting down to work on content, there's a million ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Cool, cool. Well, I know you have a free gift for the listeners if you want to share that, and the link will be in the show notes for everyone.
Sure. So that is my 5 essential routines that every solopreneur needs. And they are so things like your financial routine and planning and onboarding clients. And so there's 5 routines, and at the beginning of it has a little self-assessment. So you can kind of figure out like, all right, if I need to work on these, it's going to help you prioritize. And then there's some tips on how to build those routines into your week. So yeah, so it's my little gift. So we'll put that in the notes and people can grab that. I also have a blog that I post twice a month with all, information for small business owners. So that would get you on that list to get the blog, and lots of good tactical, practical advice for small business owners.
Right, right. And there's not enough of that out there, right?
Yeah.
Tactical, practical.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, it has been a pleasure, Kathleen,
Well, thank you.
visiting with you. So many gold nuggets, and really, like, I love the idea of reframing structure, right? And thinking about as it's something that can really free us to do more than being rigid.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And everybody out there, be sure and subscribe because you do not want to miss more powerful conversations with women who are living on purpose and really using their story to build businesses and impact the world in a positive way.